Imagine standing in a crowded emergency room, watching a child struggle to breathe while doctors and nurses walk past, ignoring his mother's desperate pleas for help. Now imagine that mother is one of the most powerful executives in the city, and no one in that hospital knows it yet. What happens when the woman they dismissed, humiliated, and turned away reveals exactly who she is? This is the story of Dr. Miranda Cole, a CEO whose son was left to suffer because of the color of their skin, and the reckoning that followed when she returned to that same hospital just hours later. What she did next didn't just shake that emergency room, it exposed a system broken at its core.
Dr. Miranda Cole wasn't someone who needed to prove herself anymore. As the CEO of Cole Medical Innovations, she'd built an empire from the ground up, a network of cutting-edge healthcare technology that saved lives across the country. Her days were a blur of boardroom meetings, product launches, and keynote speeches at medical conferences. But none of that mattered when she was with her son. 8-year-old Elijah was her world, bright, curious, with a laugh that could light up any room. He loved dinosaurs, asked a million questions, and had recently started building robots out of cardboard boxes and duct tape. That Tuesday afternoon had started like any other. Miranda had taken the afternoon off, something rare in her relentless schedule, to pick Elijah up from school and take him to the park. They'd spent hours on the swings, racing across the playground, Elijah's joy infectious as he conquered the monkey bars for the first time without help. But as the sun began to set and they headed home, something changed. Elijah's breathing became labored. His hand went to his chest, small fingers clutching his shirt as he struggled for air. "Mommy, I can't breathe." Panic shot through Miranda like ice water. Elijah had asthma, but his attacks had always been manageable with his inhaler. She reached for it in her bag, and her heart dropped. Empty. In the rush of the afternoon, she'd forgotten to refill his prescription. "Hold on, baby. Hold on." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled as she scooped him into her arms and ran to her car. The nearest hospital was St. Catherine's Medical Center, 10 minutes away through rush-hour traffic. Every second felt like an eternity as Elijah's wheezing grew louder, more desperate. She burst through the sliding glass doors of the emergency room, her son cradled against her chest, his small body shaking with each strained breath. The waiting room was packed, people hunched over in plastic chairs, a television droning in the corner, the smell of antiseptic and anxiety thick in the air. Miranda rushed to the front desk, her voice urgent but controlled. "My son, he's having an asthma attack. He needs help right now." The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, barely looked up from her computer screen. "Fill out these forms and have a seat. Someone will call you." "You don't understand. He can't breathe. He needs a nebulizer treatment now." "Ma'am, everyone here needs treatment. You'll have to wait your turn." Miranda felt the first flicker of something dark and familiar, a feeling she'd spent years learning to navigate in boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her, in country clubs where she was the only black face, in luxury stores where security followed her despite her tailored suits and designer handbag. But this wasn't about her. This was about her son. "Please," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Just look at him." The receptionist finally glanced up, her eyes sweeping over Miranda's jeans and t-shirt, the way her natural hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, Elijah's small brown face pressed against her shoulder. Something shifted in the woman's expression, not sympathy, but judgment. "Ma'am, if you can't afford treatment, this isn't about money." Miranda's voice rose, drawing stares from others in the waiting room. "My son needs medical attention. Lower your voice or I'll call security." That's when Miranda noticed the eyes on them, not concerned, not sympathetic, but suspicious, wary, like she was the problem, like her fear for her dying child was somehow an inconvenience, a disruption, a threat. Elijah's wheezing grew worse, and no one moved to help.
Miranda held Elijah tighter, feeling his small chest heave against hers, each breath a battle he was losing. She looked around the emergency room desperately, nurses chatting at a station, a doctor walking past with a clipboard, orderlies pushing an empty gurney down the hall. "Excuse me." She stepped away from the desk, directly into the path of a nurse in blue scrubs. "Please, my son." The nurse sidestepped her without breaking stride. "You need to check in at the desk first." "I did. They told me to wait, but he can't wait." The desperation in Miranda's voice was raw now, stripped of all the professional polish that usually armored her words. Another nurse, younger, paused long enough to glance at Elijah. For a moment, she felt a flicker of hope, but then the nurse's eyes traveled from Elijah's face to Miranda's, taking in her appearance with that same calculating look the receptionist had given her. "Is he on Medicaid?" the nurse asked. The question hung in the air like an accusation. "What? What does that have to do with—" "Because if payment is an issue, there are community health centers that—" "He's dying!" Miranda's shout echoed through the waiting room. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. "Why won't anyone help him?" That's when security appeared. Two officers, one white and one Latino, approached with hands hovering near their belts, their body language all wrong. Not helpful, but defensive. Threatening. "Ma'am, you need to calm down," the white officer said, his voice that practiced monotone of authority. "Calm down? My son can't breathe, and no one in this hospital will help us." "You're causing a disturbance. If you can't control yourself—" "Control myself?" Miranda felt something breaking inside her. All those years of composure, of twice as good to get half as far, of swallowing humiliation with a smile. "If my son was white, would you still be asking me to control myself? Would he still be sitting in this waiting room dying?" The question landed like a bomb. The silence that followed was deafening. People in the waiting room shifted uncomfortably. The receptionist's face flushed red. The security guards exchanged glances. And then a voice cut through the tension, sharp and cold. "What is going on here?" A doctor emerged from behind the nurses' station, a white woman in her 50s, Dr. Patricia Brennan, according to her name tag, with steel gray hair and the kind of face that had probably never questioned its own authority. "This woman is disrupting. My son is having a severe asthma attack. I've been here for 20 minutes begging for help, and everyone has done nothing but treat me like a criminal." Dr. Brennan's eyes narrowed as she looked at Miranda, then at Elijah. For a heartbreaking second, Miranda thought, finally, a doctor, someone who took an oath, someone who would see a child in distress and act. "Let me see his Medicaid card," Dr. Brennan said. Miranda stared at her in disbelief. He has private insurance, platinum coverage, but even if he didn't, he's a child who can't breathe. Since when does insurance come before treatment in an emergency room?" "Ma'am, I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate my son being left to suffocate because you've decided he's not worth your time." "That's enough." Dr. Brennan's voice hardened. "Security, please escort this woman outside. If she wants treatment, she can go to where? Where should I take my dying child, doctor? What community clinic is going to treat a severe asthma attack? What urgent care has the equipment he needs?" Elijah's wheezing had become frighteningly quiet. Not because it was better, but because he was tiring, his small body exhausting itself in the fight for oxygen. His lips had taken on a bluish tinge. Miranda saw it, felt his weight growing heavier in her arms, and something inside her snapped, not with rage, but with a cold, terrible clarity. "Please," she whispered, her pride shattered, her voice nothing but naked fear. "Please save my baby. I'm begging you." Dr. Brennan turned away, actually turned her back on a dying child. Security. The officers moved forward. One reached for Miranda's arm, and that's when Elijah went limp. "Elijah!" Miranda screamed, dropping to her knees on the filthy emergency room floor, her son's lifeless form in her arms. "Someone help him, please!" Chaos erupted. Bystanders jumped to their feet. Someone shouted for help. A young resident, a black man in green scrubs, rushed over and knelt beside them. "Page Pediatrics now!" he yelled over his shoulder. "Get me a crash cart!" His hands moved quickly, checking Elijah's airway, his pulse, tilting the boy's head back. Another nurse, Latina, with kind eyes, ran over with oxygen equipment. Finally, medical professionals were doing what they should have done 20 minutes ago. Dr. Brennan stood frozen, her face pale. The young resident looked up at her with undisguised disgust. "This child is in respiratory failure. How long has he been in this waiting room?" The silence was his answer. "Get out of my way," he said coldly, and began working to save Elijah's life while the doctor who had refused him stood by watching her indifference nearly kill a child.
The next hours passed in a blur of terror and rage. Elijah was rushed to the pediatric ICU, intubated, and placed on a ventilator. Miranda sat by his bedside, holding his small hand, watching his chest rise and fall, only because machines were breathing for him now. The young resident who'd saved him, Dr. Marcus Hayes, told her the truth with gentle but unflinching honesty. 10 more minutes, maybe less, and we would have lost him. Respiratory arrest in a child this size? There's no coming back from that. Miranda heard the words, but they felt distant, unreal. All she could focus on was the sound of the ventilator, the beep of the heart monitor, the terrible fragility of her son's small body in that hospital bed. Dr. Hayes hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry. What happened downstairs, there's no excuse for it. None." Miranda finally looked up at him, and he saw something in her eyes that made him take a step back. Not fear, but recognition. He'd just seen a flash of the woman she really was, beneath the devastation of a terrified mother. "What's your name again?" Miranda asked quietly. "Dr. Marcus Hayes. I'm a second-year resident." "Dr. Hayes, in approximately 3 hours, when my son is stable, I'm going to make a phone call. And when I do, everything is going to change. Do you understand?" He didn't understand, not really, but he nodded. "I want you to document everything that happened today. Every minute my son waited, every person who ignored him, every word that was said. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good." Miranda turned back to Elijah, her voice hardening into something sharp and unbreakable. "Because no other mother is going to go through what I did today. Not in this hospital. Not ever again." 3 hours later, Elijah's condition stabilized. The breathing tube came out. His oxygen levels normalized. He was going to survive, this time. Miranda stepped into the hallway and made her first call. "James, it's Miranda. I need you to contact the board of St. Catherine's Medical Center immediately. Yes, all of them. Tell them Dr. Miranda Cole is requesting an emergency session at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Because I'm the hospital's largest private donor, I funded their entire pediatric wing renovation. Yes, that Dr. Cole. And tell them if they want to keep a single dollar of my foundation's money, every administrator, every doctor on duty today, and that head of emergency services better be in that room when I arrive." Her second call was to her attorney. Her third was to the local news. By midnight, every member of St. Catherine's administration knew that the woman they'd dismissed, the mother they'd humiliated, the child they'd left to die, was the Dr. Miranda Cole, the woman whose name was on half the buildings in the medical district, the CEO whose foundation had donated millions to hospitals across the state, the woman who now held their futures in her hands. At 8 a.m., Miranda walked into the conference room of St. Catherine's Medical Center. She wore a tailored navy suit, her hair perfectly styled, diamond earrings catching the light. She looked every inch the powerful executive she was, except for her eyes, which held a cold fury that made everyone in that room understand they were facing something far more dangerous than anger. She was facing justice.
Miranda didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply laid out what happened, minute by excruciating minute, with Dr. Hayes's documentation projected on the screen behind her. Timestamps, witness statements, security footage showing her pleading for help while staff walked past. The hospital CEO tried to apologize. She cut him off. "You don't get to apologize to me. You get to listen." She detailed every policy violation, every ethical breach, every moment of negligence that nearly cost her son his life. And then she delivered her ultimatum. Dr. Patricia Brennan is fired, effective immediately. So is every staff member who ignored my son. Nurses, reception, security. I want their terminations in writing by noon, or I will pull every dollar of funding my foundation has ever given this hospital, and I will make sure every major donor in this city knows exactly why. The CEO stammered. "Dr. Cole, surely we can—" "I'm not finished." Her voice could cut glass. "This hospital will implement mandatory implicit bias training for all staff. You will create a patient advocacy office with 24/7 coverage. You will establish a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind, with immediate termination for violations. And you will fund a free community clinic in the neighborhood I grew up in, where families like mine who can't afford platinum insurance will never be turned away." "And if we refuse?" Miranda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I'll make sure this story is on every news channel, every newspaper, every social media platform in the country by tonight. I'll detail every donation my foundation has made, every cent you've accepted from Black donors while treating Black patients like they're disposable. I'll watch this hospital's reputation burn to the ground, and then I'll buy the ashes and build something better." The silence in that room was absolute. Do we understand each other? They did. By that afternoon, termination notices were issued. By the end of the week, new policies were in place. Within a month, the community clinic opened its doors bearing a plaque that read, "In honor of every child who was told to wait." But Miranda's work didn't stop there. She took her story public, not for revenge, but to force a conversation this country desperately needed. She appeared on national news, testified before state healthcare committees, and used her platform to expose the systemic racism that pervades American healthcare. The statistics are staggering. Black patients are 40% more likely to die from asthma complications than white patients. Black children are 3 times more likely to be hospitalized for asthma attacks. And study after study shows that Black patients receive inadequate pain management, delayed treatment, and dismissive care at rates that should shock any decent human being, but don't, because it's been normalized. Elijah recovered fully, but Miranda knows the terrifying truth. He might not have if she hadn't been who she was, if she hadn't had the power, the connections, the resources to fight back.
And that's exactly the point. What about the mothers who don't have those things? What about the families who have to swallow their rage and accept substandard care because they have no other choice? What about the children who don't survive because someone decided their lives were worth less than others? This isn't just Miranda's story. It's the story of every Black family who's been made to feel less than in a place that's supposed to heal. It's the story of a broken system that values profit over people and whiteness over humanity. But it's also a story of resistance, of refusing to accept injustice, of using privilege when you have it to burn down barriers for those who come after you.